You unlock this benefit with the key of Patreon. Beyond is another dimension. A dimension of thought. A dimension of speculation. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both waffle and substance. Of things and ideas. You've just crossed into the podcast zone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Trekking Through the Twilight Zone and all over the place. It's time to rack 'em up for an important game of pool to find out who really is the champion of champions. And I'm joined as always by Julian Darius because we're going to be playing the game of pool. This is the 5th episode in season 3 of the Twilight Zone. This is an episode where I forget his name now. What's it? Cardiff. This is another one of I Know Your Face.
Jesse Cardiff.
Jesse Cardiff takes on Fats. I'm going to find his name now.
Jonathan Winters plays
Jonathan
Fats.
Winters. That's it. Yeah, Jack. Basically, yeah. Jack Glugman, who I know as Quincy, takes on Jonathan Winters, who is Fats Brown, who is a known legend in that pool hall, Jesse Cardiff is looking to prove that he is the best, that he is the new legend. And so sort of like the dead Fats comes back to Earth for one final game for someone to prove they are the best. And Jesse wins, but that win comes with responsibilities. So, Julian, what were your thoughts on the game of pool?
I mean, I think this is a fine episode. I don't think that it's really strong. I don't think that it's not good. It's a fine episode. It's well put together. It's one of the problems with American television pre-streaming, and not just American television, is this number of minutes you've got to fit everything into. And we've looked at episodes, even in the 3rd season already, where they could have used more time, and where, the shelter just accelerates and puts its foot on the gas, and and you're just going along for this ride, and then really you can summarize this story in 2 sentences, and it works largely because of the actors, but I don't know. The pool stuff gets a little strained. I mean, it's better than the gambling episode.
Yes, I was just sort of thinking about that. Actually, those sort of things where this is a similar episode where the premise is good, and I actually like I like the reveal or the twist at the end. Actually, I kind of like this thing of sort of careful what you wish for kind of sentiment. But there is a large portion of this episode, where I am just pool. I'm not a big pool. I'm not a big pool player. I've played it for fun. It's sort of when you've been out and about. But the whole thing of sort of when they're racking the chips across the wire and all that sort of stuff, and they put this thing of sort of is it the first to 300? Is it there seems to be an assumption that the rules of the game. Yeah, I'm just sort of all right. Well, I'm going to keep. I'll just, I understand this is important, but it's I like the sentiment of the game, but I do think it's sort of there's a lot of shots of sort of going isn't this cool? Isn't it? That gets a bit boring. However, I did like this episode more because of this idea of being the best.
Yes.
And this idea of having the past sort of hang over you, in any area, but sports is a really good area. They keep downplaying the pool element. I'm just a pool guy, but there are sort of even music. Think of Elvis or the Beatles or the greatest of all time. Michael Jackson, the king of pop. Michael Jordan in basketball, all these things, these people that get sort of put on a pedestal as being the best of all time, and then you go, actually people have beaten their records, but they were the first, so that's why it's important. So I find it fascinating, this idea of, because they Jonathan Winters at one point, the Fats actually says, like, there's a reason for legends. They reach down from the past, and there was a challenge to sort of like, see if you can do what I can do and get better, make it better. Beat us, kind of thing. And I really like that idea. But there's also this idea of puritanism, isn't there? Sort of like, you can't beat the legend because they are a legend, which is what Jesse Cardiff's point is. And that's why I like this sort of like conflict between being a new legend or becoming the best, but having this thing hang on the wall that's sort of constantly sort of like, over your shoulder, and never really being able to sort of like never being able to beat it because it's not there. This thing of it's not real. It's intangible. You can't defeat what is a legend because you can't physically do it. So yeah, no, I like the sentiment of this episode quite a lot.
Yeah, I do too. I think that certainly you and I can relate to it. And I think this idea of pushing ourselves, we have this idea, especially in this country, of sort of, well, if I can't be the best, it's not worth doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You hear people say that all the time. What a toxic, terrible thing to make people think. It's great to not be the best. It's great to have hobbies, that you're never going to be amazing at, and then you could just relax and just do them and be like, yeah, I'm sure people know a lot more than me about 3D printing Transformers, but I know what I know, and it's fun, and and also just relaxing, like the way that we push ourselves in work. And here for Jesse, pool is his work. So I think that letting go of this idea of being the best is a deeply rich metaphor. At the same time, what does it mean to be the best, like you pointed out, in a sport where things change over time? You cannot put two different styles of player at chess, right, next to each other. Probably all those old school chess masters would be beaten today by the new styles, right? Just because that sort of conventional style can't stand up. And yet, as you say, we lionize these older players.
It's just, it's that thing, is that there's Hall of Fame kind of idea, these legends, and sort of like, you do get these things. Boxing's a really big one for it, isn't it? Sort of like, Muhammad Ali, and then like Mike Tyson, and you get these names that sort of come through. You go, oh, okay, brilliant, they are going to be there. But like you say, I couldn't imagine, the same weight class, but could you imagine like Tyson Fury versus Muhammad Ali? Like, well, how would that,
I don't know.
You wouldn't want one to take out the other. That's the point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, I don't want that. It just doesn't work in my head. And so yeah, you do. They provide this sort of weird conflict of, what they should be. Because they represent an era. That's the point. I think that's the idea. Is as long as you recognise that they represent an era, and then you can sort of move on. It's the same with like film. I find people talk about filmmakers from the past. You can hold up, and this is one of the things, issues I have with sort of like Martin Scorsese in many cases. I think he's one of the best, filmmakers, one of the best directors of all time. Like, love a lot of his stuff. Not all of it, but I love a lot of it. But then, I can't see how they could then criticize new styles and new things. It's almost different. It's different, but you're still great. But you represent an era in time. So yeah, it's interesting having this thing on you, as you said, pushing yourself. Because one of the things as well that this episode sort of like doesn't make a big deal about, but definitely touches on, is the sacrifice of being the best. And Jesse says about, I've lived in this pool hall, I stay late, I basically sleep here, I do this, I do that. Like, I've been, dedicated to this since I was 16 years old. And Fats is even going like, well, even I went out and did stuff. Like I went out, and your determination to be the best, like, being the first to be the best is easy because the bar is only as good as you can make it. beyond that, like it's got to keep going up, and so it sort of touches on this idea of the sacrifice of doing that. But like, is it really worth it in the end?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know either. But I think that certainly we do push ourselves too much. You know, we lionize those players who did, right? But at the same time, you know, we do have players who have taken breaks for psychological self-care now and get applauded for it. You know, this idea of just pushing yourself until you break, and you sacrifice your family, you sacrifice your mental health, you sacrifice your physical health. I think that is, I hope that is going to go by the wayside a little bit. I certainly know that. I mean, it was common in my father's generation for, you know, men to just never be home. You know, they were out working. I mean, the idea that you had a relationship with your father, it's like, you know, inconceivable, because dad was never around for anything. He was out working, and that's what you did. And that was true of people who didn't even try to be the best.
Yeah, it's interesting, like you say, that yeah, even just to sort of like to have that middle bar was sort of to keep your head above water. Like, yeah, there was that sacrifice. So to go even further would be, and you do hear these stories of, like, you know, I hear it in exceedingly wealthy people, but like, you know, people that run big corporations, CEOs, or set up a big business, and they go, you won't understand the sacrifices I've made. Like, I haven't, you know, done this, I haven't done that, and I haven't seen my kids and this other stuff. And you go, great. What's the point then?
Yeah.
Like, what have you actually achieved? I don't understand. Like, you know, yes, I've set up this great business. You go, cool. So that will probably set up your retirement, but you won't have a relationship with anybody to enjoy it with. But then I understand the dichotomy of, like, by not doing it, then, you know, you suffer and you could go other ways. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
I mean, I knew a student who pushed herself very much, who was one of the best students that I ever had, and we had certain things in common. We sort of became friends after she was my student, and we had a lot in common, and we would talk about how much we push ourselves. And, you know, I mean, we were both taking more credits than we needed. You know, I in grad school, she is an undergrad. You know, just pushing ourselves to be the best in every class and getting things done early, ahead of time, and better than anyone else. And my papers were longer and better than anyone else. And she totally understood that. And we both had this idea that by doing that, those papers and that work, even if we only got done 40% of what we wanted to do in a given day, we would still overshoot the bar by a huge amount. And so we both had this attitude that by pushing ourselves that much, in being brutal to ourselves, we would manage to achieve so much more, even if we felt that we were failures compared to what we wanted to aim for. And she killed herself. And I realize now, like, the failure of that logic is that while this works for Jesse Cardiff, it doesn't work for everyone. And if you push yourself to your breaking point, you know, to be the best, not everybody gets to be the best. You know how many people want to be the best at any given thing? It's okay to, you know, to not be the best, or be the best in some way, but not others. And pushing yourself to that point isn't maybe not necessary to be the best, but it also is something that a lot of people have done and destroyed those relationships for nothing in the end, or certainly not for their goal of being the best.
Well, yeah, because I always think about, like, you know, you see these Olympians that really go for it, like, you know, got flat out and, you know, dedicating to a sport, gymnastics or whatever it's going to be, and you think that's phenomenal. Like, you know, you're in the, you know, amazing shape. You know, you're an amazing athlete, and you can do these fantastic things, and you know, but then you're up against it, like, other people. That's the top tier. That less than 1%. They're up there as Olympians. But when it's that sort of thing, you go, okay, you win the gold medal. Where do you go? That drive and stuff, like, where does it go? But the other thing is, it goes the other way. You hear about with tennis. I'm not really a big follower of tennis, but like you hear about the world ranking, and they'll say like, oh, so and so is ranked 21st in the world. You go, how hard must that be to have that carried around with you all the time? That someone is ranking you on a world scale of where you are in tennis. That's sort of like, I would hate to have that as Can sort of like here comes Scott Weatherly, ranked 457,000th of podcasting in the world. You go, all right, well, that's depressing. Thank you very much.
No, I mean, I think I would like that. I think I would respond pretty well to that pressure myself. But I think that especially at this point in my life, I would think, I don't know that I need to be first. Mm-hmm. And those tennis players will also say it depends how you rank, and it depends, like what opportunities to play you have. It's not just an purely objective thing.
No.
And you can say that, and rationalize. I don't need to be ranked number one. A lot of times the 10th player beats the number one player in the final tournament. I mean, so yeah, I mean, there are better ways of living than this.
Yes. Yeah. But it's an interesting episode, and I like this. What I say, I like the ideas that it sort of touches on. I want to come to the end though. This again, we've talked about, in the last episode, in the Passerby, we had this notion of the afterlife and that sort of thing. And in this, we get another version, sort of, or not another version, but like another sort of, offshoot, another idea. But this idea of them being trapped, and again, it's sort of, it was interesting to me. There's a comment made by Fats when he first appears. He says, "You're never dead, and when people remember you." And this is used, I've seen films like Coco and others where this is, especially in that sort of like, Mexican or sort of Catholic sort of religion, of this idea of remembering one's ancestors. If you're not, and then if being forgotten is like the ultimate death and that sort of thing. But this almost puts like a sinister twist on it. This idea of being remembered traps you in this idea of sort of like having to, be this thing of like rolled out, to prove yourself or to sort of battle with the next sort of like, generation or whatever. And so being remembered is almost a bad thing, because you when you're forgotten, at least you can move on and sort of enjoy your afterlife. So I thought I liked that as well. This sort of like darker tone to that sort of sentiment.
Yeah, I don't know that it really works for me. I mean, I thought it was okay. I mean, but I know what you're saying, that usually it's a positive thing. Think about writers, like, we say, oh, well, this is how you get immortality, right? Is that you're remembered, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's going to remember Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare lives. He is alive today in our hearts. Well, that's true in a sense. It's not literally true, right? He's been worm food for a long time now, the actual person. But yeah, you're right that this is something that's almost universally positive that here is turned into something negative, right? And I've often wondered, like, people say, like, I'm going to go to heaven and I'm going to meet people like Shakespeare and, Muhammad Ali and yada, yada, yada. And you say, like, how busy are these guys in heaven? Right? Like,
just meet and greets all the time.
Exactly. Like, it must suck to be Shakespeare. He's like, oh my God, another high school tragic suicide. He wants to talk to me about, sonnets or some shit. So that's as close as I've come to this kind of ironic ending. But obviously, the Twilight Zone loves its ironic versions of the afterlife, and so this is a nice sort of ironic way of doing that.
Yeah, I like it, maybe because it has a certain cynicism to it that I kind of like. I think it works, and also it's that comeuppance for Jesse as well. This almost, because this needs to be the best, as you say. Isn't it positive in this episode? It is sort of shown almost like a greed, almost like a burning desire, which isn't wholly positive. Like, for what Jesse's had to give up. So I like the fact it has this sort of comeuppance. But I also like your idea of like people going to heaven and sort of like bumping into Shakespeare and being like, oh my god, I so want to talk to you about sort of like, you know, Hamlet, and him being like, I'm sorry, I've moved on now. I'm more into thrash metal and fan fiction for Dexter. You know,
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, can you imagine being Shakespeare and being like, yeah, thanks. I wrote that play 400 years ago, jackass. Right? Like, come on, you know, I can't imagine being interviewed about stuff I did, 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Can you imagine? Like, it's a bit ridiculous. Yeah, so I mean, I do like the irony of the ending. In addition to, I mean, I've played pool, not professionally, but I mean, I'm with you on obviously they're playing some weird variation where it's like first to 300 points and you can hit any ball you want. So there's, they talk all the strategy, but the strategy is this weird kind of game that they're playing. Anyway, so that's a bit odd, but I also wonder, like, okay, so this is 1961. Is it acknowledged that there's like, oh, that was the best pool player of all time? Is that a thing? You know what I mean? Like,
well, this is one of the things I wanted to touch on. Yeah, within that group, right? So this isn't sort of like a global thing. Like, there aren't people sort of like, in Germany going like, oh, Fats was the best ever. But this is what I'm saying about that Olympic. You get to those Olympians, or those people, and I think about, I say gymnastics or like whatever, like climbing or something else that you see on the Olympics. Some of those weird ones are sort of like someone's become the best at, like the Winter Olympics where they ski and shoot. They've got slits. They do those ones. And you go, wow, there's someone that's the best at that. Someone's got multiple gold medals at that. But there's a very small group of people that will recognize that person as being the best at that thing. It's a very small, select club. Like it's not a global pop culture thing. Talking about, obviously we use some massive recognized people, but there's other groups, like I say, especially in sports or even in arts. Certain musicians, sort of like folk music, or a flutist that's the best known ever. Right, be known within that circle. And I get a feeling like Fats is in that. Okay, within that thing, within that circle, like he is recognized, but like it's not a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I did find myself questioning that. I mean, I really find myself questioning why Jesse becomes recognized as like world champion for beating a ghost that only he saw and knows that he beat.
Yeah, who's he talking to in this episode? He says to people like, "You saw this. Is it breaking the fourth wall? Are we supposed to be a part of this event?"
What do you mean? I think he's talking to himself.
No, he directly says at the end of the episode, he has the thing, and he says like, "You saw that, right? I saw."
Oh yeah.
And I'm like looking at my shoulder, like, "You talking to me? Like, who are you engaging with to have this recognition? Is there like a universal mind that just recognizes you as the best? Like,
I think so. I think that's kind of the way this universe works in this episode, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's a best stamp that is like or merit badge that's like handed out directly by heaven, and that guy is forced to basically just play that sport or do that one thing for eternity until they're not the best.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I like the sentiment, but it doesn't always fully work. Anyway, final thoughts on the pool game.
No, I'm with you. I mean, it's fine. It's not one of the best episodes. It's fine. It is amazing that it is 2 actors and it basically works.
Oh yeah, good actors. I mean, let's say Jonathan Winters and I want to call him Quincy. Can't remember his name. So, but no, I enjoy it. I think they did well. I think there's some good stuff in it. I like some of the. It's more ideas that work than some of the actual sort of like what's on screen. I think some of the stuff that's on screen is a bit boring at times. But I did enjoy this episode. I think it's a good. It's got some good discussion points. So anyway, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Unless Julian, you got any final thoughts, any additional thoughts before we sort of wrap up on that one?
No, I just wanted to say that I love doing this. I love watching the Twilight Zone, and I love talking about it with you. And that if you want to give us a opportunity to do something that we love, these episodes are on the Patreon.
Mm.
In some cases, more than years before they're going to be on the main feed for Stories Out of Time and Space. And
Yes.
so if you're hearing this on the Patreon, thank you for supporting us. If you're hearing this on the main feed, remember, by the time you're hearing this, there's probably even more years. We'll be
Yeah.
done with the Twilight Zone and on to God only knows what. So, thank you for supporting us, and please leave a rating, let us know, contact us, and get involved, because we got a lot out there for you to listen
Go check
to
it
and
out. There's so
engage
much
with.
more. That's it. We've said, not only is the Twilight Zone, there's different series. There's the Outer Limits. There's so much more we're going to be getting onto. So if you want to hear that, check out that content on Patreon. There's so much to check out. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And we do hope to hear from you, and hope to leave a review. But for now, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next episode.